Well, this, for me, is another nail in the coffin of Prince Andrew, which has already been nailed down quite extensively over the last few years.
This is somebody who was right at the centre of it for quite a long period of time, and also made very bad judgments afterwards. So
he doesn't remember Virginia Giuffre, despite the fact that a picture which has been verified by the FBI is in existence.
I can absolutely categorically tell you it never happened.
Do you remember meeting her at all?
No.
Do you know you didn't meet her, or do you just not remember meeting her?
No, I don't know if I've met her, but no, I have no recollection of me.
Her lawyer confirming to NBC News that the prince has now paid Giuffre an undisclosed amount to settle the case, saying in a statement,
Andrew, of course, denies that this ever happened.
He denies that it ever happened, and he's going to keep denying that it ever happened, but he knows the truth.
Buckingham Palace has announced that Prince Andrew is returning his royal and military titles to the Queen and will no longer be referred to as His Royal Highness in any official capacity.
And King Charles has reportedly been told to cut all ties with Prince Andrew after documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein case were released.
You've been on his private plane.
Yes.
You've been to stay on his private island.
Yes.
You've stayed at his home in Palm Beach.
Yes.
The royal family, are they saying anything about?
Now, I know you've probably heard of the disturbing world behind Epstein, but have you ever thought about the people that were involved in it? The high elites? Well, amongst one of those people was Prince Andrew. And in this video, I'm going to uncover the scandal behind it and how the corrupt royal family got him out of severe trouble. Prince Andrew is in a certain group of people that are very, very lucky to be born into a world that he lives to this day. He was born into the British royal family and was the third child and the second son to Queen Elizabeth II. But what if I told you Prince Andrew, a servant to our country, has been involved in situations that should have ended in severe consequences, but instead the opposite happened with him. Born on February 19th, 1960, the future Duke of York was raised in the Grand Buckingham Palace in England. You see, in the royal family there seems to be a trend with how the princes are raised. Prince Andrew, although lived in London, like his relatives Philip and Charles, they attended Gordonstown boarding school in Scotland, and for a brief time he was an exchange student at Lakefield College School in Ontario, Canada. Then after completing his secondary school education, he entered the Britannia Royal Naval College in 1979 to train as a naval officer, again following in his father's footsteps. Completing the course in 1980, he pursued pilot training in both fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. He then received his pilot's wing in 1981, and the following year as a Royal Navy sub-lieutenant assigned to the HMS Invincible. And then he participated in the Falklands War by doing the helicopter missions. And after the war finished, he remained on active duty up until 2001, when he eventually retired. But you're probably sat there thinking, this man served for our country in a legitimate war, most of us to which would never ever do. But when I sit here and uncover what he's been up to, you'll understand why this man, behind all the mainstream media, has a very dark name. Throughout Prince Andrew's adulthood, he held a woman dear to his side. This woman was invited over to the Buckingham Palace numerous times, to the extent the security within the palace had a sneaky suspicion that they were dating. This woman I'm talking about is Ghislaine Maxwell, and she was the woman that introduced Prince Andrew into another world, a world which involved all of the elites. She was born in France and raised in Oxford, England. She'd attend Oxford colleges and later on in life became a director of Oxford United Football Club. So you're probably thinking she was born into a family that had wealthy background. And you're right, she was. Her father was very, very wealthy, with a net worth of over $800 million. And he was also a one-time member of Parliament before his death in 1991. It was around this time in the early 1990s where she would meet two men. The man she first met was obviously Prince Andrew, and these supposedly met at a time where Ghislaine was still at Oxford University. The second man she later met was a man called Jeffrey Epstein, who was a man that was doing very, very well for himself, but had a dark secret. For the very small percentage of you guys who don't know who Jeffrey Epstein is, here's a small background check of who he is. Now, I can't go too much into detail on who he is because it's a whole separate video in itself, which I won't be going down in this video. But Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in a middle-class family, but as a kid, he was quite smart to say the least. He skipped 2 grades and graduated from Brooklyn's Lafayette High School at the age of 16. Although he enrolled in Cooper Union and later at New York University in the early 1970s, he never received degrees at either school. Still, Epstein got a job teaching calculus and physics at Dalton School, However, his employment was short-lived because he was fired 2 years later for poor performance. But before Epstein left his teaching job, he experienced that thing where he was in the right place at the right time, because he met someone that truly changed his life and introduced him into a whole new world. He was able to make an important connection through one of his students' parents, Alan Greenberg, the CEO of Bear Stearns. He was impressed by Epstein's ability with numbers, so Greenberg gave him an assistant job at Bear Stearns in 1976. And from there, Epstein quickly climbed the ladder, eventually advising some of the company's wealthiest clients. In 1981, Epstein left Bear Stearns and established his own financial consulting firm, Intercontinental Asset Groups, in which he helped clients recover embezzled money. This let Jeffrey Epstein enjoy the life that many elites did, as his net worth creeped towards the billions. Along the way, Epstein made some serious connections that ended up being friendships. And these people consisted of Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Kevin Spacey, Alan Dershowitz, and last but not least, Prince Andrew. And next is when Jeffrey would meet Ghislaine at a New York party. Now, I know I haven't mentioned Prince Andrew in a bit, but this information is important for you guys to understand who these people are, because they're a major part in the story. After the New York party, Ghislaine and Jeffrey started dating, and several years later split up and remained very close companions, because they had a scheme that they were both a part of. Essentially, they both started sex trafficking very underage girls in the range of 12 to 16. But they were doing this years before meeting Prince Andrew. So that begs the question, how long did it take Prince Andrew to know what these two were getting up to, and for him to get involved? Whilst knowing, whilst being in the army, whilst being a part of the royal family. Well, here's a rough timeline. It wasn't long before Prince Andrew and Epstein became close companions, and this statement is backed up because in the same year they met, Prince Andrew was already taking flights with Epstein to his island in Little St. James, and another flight to Florida. And then later in the same year, Prince Andrew would have personally invited the pair to the Balmoral, the Queen's Royal Scottish residence. Then in 2001, the infamous photo showing Prince Andrew with Virginia and Maxwell is reported to have been taken by Epstein in March 2001 at what is understood to be Maxwell's Belgravia home. Then in 2010, Epstein was convicted to 18 months imprisonment after pleading guilty to prostituting minors in 2008. After his release in 2010, Prince Andrew was photographed with Epstein in Central Park in New York. And recently Prince Andrew did an interview with the BBC, and this situation was brought up by the interviewer, and here's what he had to say.
Was the fact that once he had been convicted, I stayed with him, and that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down. I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
And it's safe to say that the general public didn't buy his excuses. And then the footage reportedly from December of that year, which did not emerge publicly until years later, showed Andrew outside Epstein's Manhattan home waving off a woman. Then in 2011, the Duke of York quit his role as a UK trade envoy, following his criticism of the Central Park photos the year before. In April 2015, allegations that Andrew had sex with Virginia emerged in court documents related to Epstein, and the Buckingham Palace obviously denied the allegations. Born in 1983 California and later relocated to Florida, you see, she had the complete opposite upbringing to Prince Andrew. She had a very rocky upbringing. Already at the age of 7, she experienced her first scouring experience, because she was sexually assaulted by a family friend, and claiming that her childhood had already been taken away at that point. 7 years later, she was in and out of foster care and would often find herself sleeping on the streets, and found nothing but hunger, pain, and more abuse. The year 2000 rolls around, and Virginia is trying to rebuild her life. And this is where things become bad to worse, because she meets British associate Ghislaine Maxwell. She was working as a locker room attendant at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach. Ghislaine met Virginia there and saw a chance to exploit at what was a low point in her life. Ghislaine offered her an interview for a chance to train as a massage therapist. Later down the line, Virginia would find herself meeting Jeffrey Epstein at his Palm Beach house in a very unconventional way. And that's because she came over to massage and instead found herself being sexually abused. In 2001, Virginia is aged 17, and Epstein is bringing her to the famous city of London. And this is where she was introduced to Prince Andrew. And then this picture was taken, and is now a major piece that was used in the investigation for the allegation. But it was after, when they went to a nightclub, Virginia says she was told by Ghislaine that she had to do for Andrew what I'd do for Jeffrey.
But Giuffre says the prince had sex with her on 3 occasions.
He decided to clap back at an interview and claim that he's never ever seen her before.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
Then in 2021, Virginia officially filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew for sexual abuse under the Child Victims Act in a statement about her claims.
Lawsuit has just been filed against Prince Andrew over allegations of sex abuse. Let's speak now to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, who joins me on the phone. And Rhiannon, this involves Virginia Giuffre, who in a statement said the lawsuit was brought under the Child Victims Act to allege that she was trafficked to him and sexually abused by him.
Then in September of 2021, the first hearing would occur, which would be virtual. And Prince Andrew's lawyer, Andrew Brettler, described Virginia's lawsuit as baseless, non-viable, and potentially unlawful. For the first time in court, Brettler also floated the idea that Virginia could not sue Prince Andrew because of an out-of-court settlement she had previously signed with Jeffrey Epstein. Then his close friend got convicted in late 2021, in the month of December. Fast forward to January 2022, Prince Andrew's luck started running thin, real quick. 13th of January, things got very personal inside the family of the royals. His mother, who was at the time as the Queen, would strip him of any military affiliations and royal patronages. Then reports came out that Virginia's lawyers saying that she would be unlikely to accept a purely financial settlement. And then on the 14th of January, Virginia requests testimony from Andrew's former assistant, Robert Olney, saying that she has a reason to believe that he has relevant information about Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Carrying on to the next day, Prince Andrew's lawyer questioned Virginia's husband and psychologist, claiming that she might have a false memory. For the next week it went quiet, not much happened, but then on the 26th he was on trial by jury, which is as followed. In New York court documents filed by Andrew's lawyers, the Duke denied all allegations against him. The 11-page documents set out a series of defences without assuming the burden of proof and expressly denying any and all wrongdoing. And now the Prince, and especially the royal family, are under immense pressure because there's a real chance he could get found guilty. And the pressure clearly got the best of him, because on the 15th there was an agreement that was reached between Virginia and the Prince of an out-of-court settlement. According to the documents filed in New York by David Boies, the two parties will file a dismissal upon Virginia's receipt of the settlement payment, to which the amount has not been publicly disclosed. And it continued by saying, "It is known that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked countless young girls over many years, and Prince Andrew regrets his association with Epstein, and commends the bravery of Virginia and other survivors standing up for themselves. He pledges to demonstrate his regret for his association with Epstein by supporting the fight against the evils of sex trafficking and by supporting its victims." Although she got a nice payout, there's a theory of how the Prince exactly did get the money to be paid out, because the rumoured figure was about $16 to $20 million. And if you look online, Prince Andrew's net worth is roughly around $5 million. So how exactly did he pay it out? And there's one that seems to be the favourite of many, and that was that the British tax money was used to help bail him out. But we'll never know. We'll never know the truth. But what we do know is the royal family played a massive part in this. Played a massive part in someone being on the streets roam free without a charge to his name.